Welcome to Plain Speaking, a voice of the Democratic Party which is intended to inform the public of the principles and the practices of the Democratic Party, which we all know is the preeminent party in providing the greatest freedom that America has ever known. And our program is sponsored by many good people, and their names will be up on the screen after the show, as well as they were up before the show began. And it is a program that is funded entirely by donations from some very, very generous Democrats. And I'm very happy to have a stellar panel today. Starting to my immediate right is Marsha Hunter, who happens to be the vice chair of the Blair County Democratic Committee. And way yonder to my left over here is George. George is next, but Marty, who is a very active member of the Democratic Party in Blair County. And to his right, ooh, what a word. And deciding beside Marty is George Thompson, who was for many years the treasurer of the Blair County Dems, and now he is just another active committee member. And I am Frank Rosenhoover, a member of the Blair County Democratic Committee, a member of the State Committee, and chairman of the North Central Caucus of that great party. So today we have a large number of issues to bring to your attention. And what we want to impress upon you throughout the program is that the only way we're going to find, or that we're going to cause change to happen in government, is to vote, and vote for candidates who will represent your viewpoints or the viewpoints of our party. Because if we don't vote, all of the rhetoric, all the demonstrating, all of the moaning and groaning and complaining will be for naught, because the only way that we can affect change is to vote in the primary election for your Democratic candidates, and in the general election, vote for them again. So please, make it a point to guarantee that you'll vote and to talk to your family and friends to get them out. We have some significant issues coming up. And the first one we're going to talk about today is the budget for the state of Pennsylvania. Now, as you all know, by constitutional fiat, the state of Pennsylvania must have presented by the governor a budget, usually in the first week of February, which will cover the fiscal year July 1 to June 30. Governor Wolf presented a budget in February of 2015, which would have represented the budget for July 1 to June 30 of 2016. Unfortunately, because of some wrangling politically and some other extraneous issues, the state government was never able to come out with a full budget. They came out with a partial budget. Marsha has a lot of facts and figures and issues that we'll be talking about to make you aware of what actually the problems are. But since the total budget was not passed, the law says he had to present another budget. So now we have two budgets before us, the unfinished 2015-16 and certainly the newly presented 2016-17. So with that in mind, we're going to take a look at what are some of the significant issues that are impacting it right now. And George and Marsha both have a listing of specific departments and so on. And I think that, George, are you going to speak in general terms of what are the biggest issues, such as deficit, pension?
Sure, Frank. There's, of course, many issues with the Pennsylvania budget. And let's back up a little bit, back up to the Governor Corbett years. One of the things that happened under Governor Corbett is rather dramatic reduction in education funding. So when, and of course he lost an election, and there are various reasons why he lost when he ran against Governor Wolf, but one of the major reasons was apparently education funding. We had 30,000 teachers, aides laid off in Pennsylvania because of lack of money. And this there was a general taxpayer and voter revolt on this dramatic reduction in education funding. So when Governor Wolf came out with his 2015-16 budget, the one that is not yet approved, that should have been approved actually back in July of 2015, he had rather large increases to education funding. Tied into that was also Republican issues. The Republicans wanted to eliminate the sale of liquor from government state stores, instead give the sales to private industry, Walmarts, Sheetses, and that also was part of the budget discussion in a way, because Republicans viewed this sale of the license that would be awarded to these different private stores as an income producer. And Governor Wolf pointed out that, well, the state stores actually generate income for the state, so even though the sale of license might be a one-time fix for income, the state was going to lose revenue in the sale of liquor through the state stores. Also, Governor Wolf had a different dramatic reshuffling of income in the last unapproved budget, the 2015-2016 budget. Some of the factors there was a reduction in property taxes. And with his proposal to increase income taxes, to expand sales taxes, which Governor Wolf did, he also wanted to reduce property taxes. This gets back to the idea that the funding for our education system, once upon a time, about I guess 20 years ago, used to be 50% of the education expenditures were state monies. Now we've over the years reduced the proportion of money the state puts into education to approximately 32% of the total expenditures in the
That's right.
in the state education expenditures. 32% are state. The rest have to be made up by property taxes or personal income tax, which generally, is the same. And Governor Wolf wasn't really talking about a change in the personal income tax for the local share of education. So anyway, there are numerous other factors. The severance tax on natural gas production was another factor. Governor Wolf viewed the shale industry, the gas from the shale industry, the gas drilling, as a new and valuable source of income. And the Republicans just said no, they're afraid their industry is going to leave. There were different reasons that didn't really make sense in my mind, because the proposal that Governor Wolf made would have not made taxes higher really than most of the other states. So really the gas producers had nowhere to go in a sense. All the states had higher taxes than Pennsylvania did. So anyway, those are some of the factors that now we're entering into a new fiscal year, and the old fiscal year's arguments haven't been resolved.
Yeah. Well, no, go ahead, Marsha.
Well, this is sort of like deja vu all over again. And what I'm referring to is with the state pensions, way back under Ridge, because the stock market was doing well, the state didn't contribute to the pensions the way they were supposed to. And then when the stock market went poorly, there was a big shortfall in state pensions, because instead of paying the same amount of money every year as they should have, they did not.
Right.
The same thing exactly is happening with education in Pennsylvania. Obama did a stimulus bill and put all the stimulus money into the state of Pennsylvania, which we used for education. We were supposed to be at the regular funding we always were at and use the stimulus money to improve education and hire more teachers and stimulate the economy. Instead, they used it to pay for education. And then when the stimulus was gone, they didn't want to have to raise taxes to make up that difference. And what it is it's very poor leadership at the state level under two different Republican governors. And so that's one of the reasons that we're in this big mess. because instead of using the stimulus money the way it was supposed to be used, they used it to fund things that the state was already supposed to be raising taxes and paying for. I have some statistics here that I printed out, and this is Wolf's old budget. This isn't the new one. This is the old. This is a comparison between Wolf's 2015 budget and House Bill 1192, which is what the State House presented to Governor Wolf. New school funding under Wolf, $507 million. Under Republicans, $8 million. New pre-kindergarten slots, 14,000 under Wolf, 3,500 under the Republican budget. Minimum wage of $10.10. The number of work $10.10. I wish it was 10,000. But anyway, $10.10, raise of the minimum wage to $10.10. The number of workers that would get that raise in the state of Pennsylvania would have been 1.27 million. And of course, the Republicans didn't recommend anyone get a raise as far as the raise in minimum wage. Human service funding, $498,667 increase under Wolf, none under the Republicans. Mental health funding, which is very important right now as far as people talking about a lot of gun tragedies and things like that. They always say, well, don't do gun control, improve the mental health system. That's not my argument. That's an argument by a lot of people. Wolf wanted to raise new mental health funding by $18.9 million. The Republicans, nothing. Property tax relief. Under Wolf's program, the average tax relief for the typical homeowner would be $968 of tax relief a year. Under the Republicans, nothing. Drilling tax, which is on Marcellus Shale, obviously. $1.8 billion, which is them finally paying their fair share like they do in every other state where they drill. The Republicans, nothing. And lastly, higher education. Community colleges, $15 million increase under Wolf, $6.5 under the Republicans. State system universities, $44 million under Wolf, $12.4 million under the Republicans, and state-related universities, $83 million under Wolf and $17.4 million under Republicans. And everyone always says that the education of our youth is one of the most important things, not only for economic development, but for their children. And this is what we're looking at.
And I think we should take a look then at what happened to this budgetary process. Now, back in, I think it was June or July or whatever the date was, the state Senate and the governor came up with a compromise, which they then sent over to the House, the General Assembly. They don't call it the House, it's the General Assembly. And the General Assembly, because of the actions of the significant members who are Tea Party affiliated, blocked the passage of the compromise. And that's when the budgetary process fell apart. So all of these facts and figures that we had drawn out were representations of where the Republicans were to begin with, but they did come around to a solution whereby the governor and the Senate could agree. But since it was denied by the House, there has been no attempt, to my knowledge, even to this very day, that the governor and the members of the Senate and the General Assembly have gotten together to try to iron out their differences on the old one, let alone present a new one. George, are you familiar with any?
Actually, I've been unable to detect any official movement. I mean, there's been discussions with the Republican House, which you accurately portray as the obstacle in the settlement of last year's budget. I mean, actually, leadership had supposedly agreed on the Senate compromise with Governor Wolf, and then House members didn't allow the leadership and the Republican leadership in the House to follow through with the compromise. You know, and Marsha, you reminded me during the election between Governor Corbett and Governor Wolf, this pension issue certainly was a large issue, and it accounted for competing claims. The Republicans said, well, we've increased education more than previous allocations, and Governor Wolf said, well, no, the classroom education budget hasn't been increased back to the 2010-2011 budget, which is the final year of the affordable the
stimulus money, yes.
program. And both statements were accurate, and the difference is in the pension. The state has been underfunding the pensions for years. And,
as our county, and they admitted it.
Well, yeah, a lot. Well, actually, private industry. I mean, part of the thing you're just currently seeing on television about the steel workers in Johnstown is an example of private industry really not setting enough money aside for retirees. The argument on TV is health care. Not enough money. But in any case, this is a problem in municipal governments, this underfunding of the pension system and promised health care benefits. Private industry has the same problems.
Right.
But in any case, so both statements were accurate, and this is going to be an increasing problem because there was a change in the pension system. It lowered some of the benefits in 2010, but it also increased mandated payments to rectify all of the underpayments over the last 15 years. And actually, our Altoona representative, John McGinnis, in his legislation that no one wants to consider, recognizes this underfunding. And the reason no one wants to consider his legislation is, guess what? You have to increase taxes.
That's right, increase the income.
And that is the obstacle in all of these different things. No one seems to want to increase taxes.
So one of the things that we can do as citizens, everyone who's viewing this show, and you ought to talk to your friends and family, we're not going to get a budget for 2015-16 any sooner than we will get one for 2016-17 unless the governor and his people meet with the Senate and the General Assembly people. So we implore those of you who are watching us, call Senator Eichelberger, call John McGinnis, call Judy Ward, and tell them, get to the table, because this thing will not be solved by irresponsible rhetoric in the media. And that's what we're hearing, not only in Pennsylvania, but all over this country. There is a tremendous lack of cooperation, collaboration, and compromise. And so the viewers, please, get on your phones, get on the email system, get on the texting, get on Facebook. Put some pressure on these guys, because if we don't, when will we have a budget? Are we going to go through 2017-18 without having budgets? And the figures you heard Marsha mention, I was at an advisory board meeting at Penn State Altoona last night. We are being underfunded by several million. And if we do, then we're not going to be able to maintain the quality of education at our Penn State Altoona campus or at Penn State University. And our representative for the Altoona area, John McGinnis, was interviewed by some representatives of Penn State Altoona, and his comment was about funding. He said there should not be one single penny of public money spent for Penn State totally, meaning State College and all the systems. And so there's a guy, and this is somebody that Altoonans ought to get on.
Oh, absolutely. He made the statement. I went to his town hall meeting a month ago, whenever, and he made the statement that Penn State, Pennsylvania State University, I think he said 7% of its budget is actually state money, and he saw no reason why the state, like you say, should fund it. Well, part of the reasons the state has an interest in this is not all families. I guess his idea is that families should pay for the education of their children.
Absolutely.
The problem is you have families that can't afford to pay for the education. And so what John McGinnis is saying is those people coming from a low-income family, they're out of luck. You know, either they could figure out how to get scholarships.
Only the rich can afford to be educated.
Or work somehow part-time and continue to go to school. And there really is an argument that, in my mind, is tragic for the United States, because education is the way we can maintain our economy.
And compete in the world.
And compete.
And here's the thing, 40, 50 years ago, you could do that at a place like IUP. You could work part-time and work your way through. Now even IUP is about, oh, I don't know, $15,000 a year at least.
Yeah, I remember.
I don't even know what it is right now, but it would be absolutely impossible. I saw some figure that you'd have to work at minimum wage. You'd have to work 120 hours a week in order to, you know, pay for. Yeah, so it's impossible.
Okay.
It's a nice idea. And at one time, it was possible, but with the rising costs, it's impossible for people to work their way through college. It's impossible.
I worked at the chem lab at IUP when I went there. I graduated in '62.
Well,
but anyway, we
go.
got our first break, and when we come back, we're going to pick up a little bit more of the talk on the budget and then move on to some other topics. Welcome back to Plain Speaking. We are discussing a significant problem in Pennsylvania, the lack of budgets, and that's plural. And we're trying to let you know what the issues are. The governor and the Senate of Pennsylvania had agreed to a compromise, and the General Assembly in Pennsylvania voted it down. And since then, both sides have engaged in some rather reckless rhetoric, as far as I'm concerned, demeaning each other publicly about whose fault it was and get to the table. But until we do, we're going to have this whole mess. So we say again to you folks, call McGinnis, call Eichelberger, call Ward, and tell them to get to the table. Now, we're going to wrap up our discussion on the budget, because I know we could go the whole hour, but we have several other topics. But Marsha, you have another comment or two before we move on, because these things just didn't happen. They've been caused over time.
Right. As I had said previously, the real gap in the education funding has to do with the fact that the House and Senate and Governor Corbett used the stimulus money to fund existing things instead of using the stimulus money to go above and beyond and hire more teachers and things of that nature. And now it's time to have the money there for education, and he's refusing to raise taxes for that shortfall that he should have been raising incrementally all along. And once again, it's one of these things where now there's a huge shortfall and everybody's like, well, where are we going to get the money? Well, if you had incremental tax increases this whole time,
it would never occur.
It would have never occurred, these big deficits. They would not occur if you take care of business on a year-by-year basis instead of constantly kicking the can down the road and making it someone else's problem.
Marty raised an issue while we were on our break. Why are the costs of education going up every year? Well, the same reason that it is to raise a family or to own a home or to be an individual business person. Everything we consume as people increases every year in cost. There is hardly a thing we buy anymore that is more this year than it was last year. So if everything we consume, whether it's utilities or it's materials for our vehicles or it's food, it's rent, and it's, you know, it goes up every year. So how can government maintain the same level of service if they don't have a comparable increase in revenue, and that the only revenue they have is taxes?
And this excitement about, oh, I hate government and I hate paying taxes and this whole Tea Party thing, look at what happened in Flint.
Yeah, those poor people on that water.
Do you want to have drinking water? And I saw the map. They came out with the map where the most, what's in the water in Flint?
Lead.
The most lead. The whole state of Pennsylvania was practically black.
Well, yeah, and here in
our
Pennsylvania,
infrastructure is very old.
Actually, in Altoona, we have they test children for lead in their blood. I didn't realize this.
Yes.
But if a child is on Medicaid, that's one of the mandated tests. And here, Altoona is very high in the lead concentration in the blood. the children here in Altoona have a higher lead concentration than the ones in
That's why
Flint.
they're so heavy.
Now here it's not the water.
No,
It is paint. All the old houses with lead-based paint.
And that's true, George, but then you start to wonder when you see a map like I saw of how dark the state of Pennsylvania is as far as lead in the water. You have to start wondering, is it really the old paint in these houses? I mean, if you test somebody's blood for lead, how do you tell really where the lead's coming from?
Exactly.
Well, now, you know what I mean? And that was what we always thought was the lead in the paint in the old houses, especially in the city of Altoona, the older structures and so forth.
The issues there, and I went to the Altoona Water Authority website to see whether lead was being tested for when Flint, Michigan's issue became national. And actually, the Altoona Water Authority had no information on lead. Now, subsequently, I discovered that they do test for lead. In fact, when I went to the website, they had a statement on there that the accuracy of testing for lead at the reservoir level isn't valid. You have to test for lead in the water at your household tap.
Exactly.
As a tip,
because it's going through the pipes.
And so they gave you a reference to a federal agency to find out more information about lead in the water. This is the Altoona Water Authority website.
So what you're saying is we don't know.
Well, they subsequently said that they do know. I read an article in the Altoona Mirror that said that they do test, and we don't have substantial amounts of lead in the water.
I do know, having worked on the commission that was appointed when they wanted to sell the authority years ago.
Yes.
I was one of 6 people appointed onto that committee, and the testing techniques that the city of that the Altoona Water Authority uses, they go through 5 processes. And so it's not that they don't do it. And they reaffirm the fact that there may be a higher concentration of lead in the bodies of people in our community, but the cause is not significantly, is not even remotely blamable to the Water Authority, because they do a lot of screening and a lot of purifying before it comes out of the tap. Now, what happens before it gets into the tap, then you have no idea. If there are pipes now, there is hardly a day goes by that you don't drive around Altoona and you don't see the Water Authority digging up some property. Every day of the week I see them all over the place. Some of our pipes are the old terracotta pipes.
Right.
Yeah, that's the sewage.
Right,
the
and
water.
so the whole thing is, that's another boondoggle that's going to come down. Infrastructure, you know.
Well, last year in my own house, and in fact in our neighborhood, we had about 10 houses last year that lost gas, natural gas, heating our house. And the reason is the Altoona Water Authority apparently had a leak in their pipes. And also the gas company must have had a leak because water got into the gas lines, and then in the sub-freezing temperatures, the worst time you want to have no gas, the gas, as it came up out of the ground, froze in the sub-freezing temperatures and literally prevented gas from flowing into our house. And there were about 10 houses in our neighborhood that encountered that situation, and I guess it's been remedied. Our gas continues to flow this winter.
Well, and the thing is no one likes to pay taxes. I mean, that isn't something that anyone enjoys. But you want to have decent water. You want to have decent infrastructure so that water, by the time it comes to your tap, isn't filled with lead. You want to make sure that you have decent roads and that people aren't getting killed on bridges, and you need police force, and you need these things. There are a lot of things that you need government to provide. There's this big, huge anti-government, oh, I hate government, I don't want government to do anything. Well, imagine the water situation put in the hands of the private sector. They're not going to be caring about anyone's safeness. They're not going to care if they put, you know, lead water into a disadvantaged community. They're not going to care about things like that. You need a watchdog situation for the public good. There are certain things that should not be
Well,
governed by profit. They need to be governed for the public
It's the
good.
health, safety, and welfare of the people that's very important.
Well,
Yeah,
apparently in Michigan, I guess the people didn't have a say in
No.
the changing of the system because of the emergency management system put in place by the governor.
Yeah.
And if they had a say in it, they would have said, no, that'd be like around here taking it from the reservoirs and putting the supply into the Junior River.
Yeah.
How would that work?
Yeah, the problem in Flint and also in Detroit, which is another tragedy, is all the jobs have moved out, but the infrastructure and the people are left behind, and there's not enough tax revenue to really fund an adequate government or, as you're pointing out, an infrastructure. And like you say, Marty, what the governor of Michigan, they took over control of Flint,
Yeah.
the city.
Yeah.
And people had no say.
And they had no say, and in order to save money, they took and switched the water from Flint, Michigan, who was formerly getting it from Detroit, who apparently has better water system, and they were taking it out of the Flint River. And that was to save money, but as we've discovered, I mean, that was not really thought through because they didn't treat the water from the Flint River, and it corroded all the water pipes that then leached all of the lead out.
You see, this is the thing that is so onerous about this whole process. Government cannot provide services without income.
Exactly.
The only income government has is through taxation. Now, I realize people say they hate like heck to pay taxes or too much tax. But the point is, we could make things better if we would demand what I call the AA approach. More reasonable allocation, and then a strictly public accounting of all the money that's spent. I think that every single legislator, whether it's city, county, state, or national, should have to present on the internet every week of the year on a Friday the amount of money they've spent for whatever they do, and the government should put out how much money we spent in every one of the categories. And that way the public could take a look at what did we allocate and why, and what did you spend and why. But today there's no accountability. We have legislators in Harrisburg that have expense accounts that don't demand receipts, except for housing, I understand. But can you imagine unfettered expense accounting?
Well, and the a lot of the legislators at the State House, they don't want to touch their own pensions, but they want to get rid of state pensions. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
They put that special article in the law that would exempt them from this whole new 401k, whatever they want to do. Well, we certainly have many other issues that
we haven't talked about. I wanted to bring up, you said at the beginning there doesn't seem to be much discussion right now. Well, there is a little bit of discussion about what's called the fiscal code, and part of the discussion there, and this impacts education too, it's one thing to appropriate a total amount of money for K through 12 education, but then it needs to be allocated by the state to the school district. And there's been a number of discussions now about how you allocate this money. Once you come up with it, then of course what we've been talking about is how much money the state's going to contribute. But once you come up with that amount of money, then it also is allocated to the school district. And the state of Pennsylvania has been operating under basically whoever has power at the legislature. They get the money sent to their local school district.
So it's not based upon number of students enrolled or number of disadvantaged students enrolled or anything like that?
That's right. In the past, I mean, obviously that's a factor. The more students you have, it's a factor, but it's not a strict.
It's not a strict formula.
Now they have come up because they realize that this is something that needs to be corrected. Pennsylvania is one of the few states that doesn't have a written policy on how money is allocated to each of the school districts, and so they've come up with one. This was arrived at last year, and that's another discussion, and it includes factors like the number of students, the poverty,
disadvantage too.
Whether there's handicaps involved, whether there English, foreign language students involved, a number of students, let's say, that come from households that speak Spanish. Well, those school districts that have a lot of these students, they get extra allocation. There's also a factor in there for the large school districts that are rural, that have school buses that have to travel tremendous distances.
Transportation problems,
the density of the student, so these are areas right now that actually Governor Wolf, who supports this new funding formula, but he does not support it for fiscal year 2015-16, and the reason he doesn't is because the new formula disadvantaged some of the urban school districts, and they were but under Governor Corbett shorted in funding the urban school districts. So Governor Wolf wants to increase the urban school districts
to get
bring
back
them
where
back
they
up.
should have been. Because Philadelphia, especially, Corbett.
Philadelphia is a tragedy there, and of course Philadelphia, you can't exactly blame the school district because they've been under state government leadership, just like Flint, Michigan. The state has been administering the Philadelphia school district over the last 10 years, I think. And in fact, they've actually gone to a lot of charter schools in Philadelphia.
Yeah, they have.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've got to begin to demand better allocation and better accountability, because if you don't have those two factors, like you were just pointing out, if we don't know how and why they're allocating the way they do and why and how they're spending the money, we've got to monitor that so we have a legitimate argument instead of saying it's a waste. These people who say you can balance a budget by cutting out waste is ridiculous from the standpoint we don't even know how much waste there is. So the whole thing is we need taxes to have good government, good services, and if you don't want them, if you want to have to fix your own potholes, as McGinnis says you should, then don't raise taxes. But if you want good schools, good police, good firemen, good highways, you've got to have the money. Well, we're taking our last break, and when we come back, we are in deep trouble to get through our agenda, but we're going to try it. Marty, how many minutes do you think it'll take? The circus.
Circular
the schoolyard. Welcome back to Plain Speaking. And we know that there are so many things about the budget that we can't even really truly codify and talk about today, but the next time we meet, the next program next month, we'll be talking again about it. But right now we want to get into the politics first. And there, on the national level, it's much more chaotic than it is, I think, at the state level. The candidates who are running for president, on the other side, they have engaged in reckless Republican rhetoric for as long as I can say. And we know what's happening. And I would appreciate for the panel to make a comment about what is the state of the national elections when you take a look at how the Democrats are presenting and how the Republicans are presenting.
Well, I just returned from a 2-week vacation in South Carolina. Who, in the Republican side, they're having their primary this coming Saturday, a few days from now. And I had the privilege of watching all of the Republican presidential ads on their television. So it is interesting for me, and basically they keep calling each other liars.
Yeah. Have they presented anything of a positive nature that says to the American people, here is our position on education, here's our position on jobs, here's what we want to do to make sure immigration
Well,
works.
I know Ted Cruz, of course, he's getting rid of Obamacare. Every single word is going to be revoked when he becomes president. So I decided, well, let's see what Ted Cruz's health care plan is. I went into his website. Nothing.
Nothing. Right.
Nothing.
Exactly.
And he's making that a major issue in his campaign. He's getting rid of Obamacare, and his substitute is, well, I assume he has something, but it's not on his website.
No. His platform is you're on your own. You're on
See,
your own.
They want to
That's it.
privatize it so that
Yeah.
you have to go and bid on getting a company that'll cover you instead of having a health care system provided by the government. They want every single American to have to go out and seek their own and pay for their own, and that's obscene.
Well, actually, you know, they kept talking about the government health care system under Obamacare. Actually, it is private under Obamacare. The only thing that Obamacare does for those people that can't afford to pay for insurance, they're allowed to shop.
Yes.
They
And
actually have a choice.
And there is a subsidy by the government.
And if they can't afford it, there's a subsidy given by the government to afford whatever plan they decide. I mean,
And it's been a big success.
Right.
Well,
It's been a big success. It's saved money rather than been a revenue drainer. It's created jobs instead of eliminated jobs. It has done the opposite of everything that the Republicans have against it.
And it hasn't caused the loss of any jobs either.
well,
No,
no,
that's the
jobs
You
are
talk
up
about
under
lies.
Right, but it's just all lies. You know,
Yeah.
it's the
There's a reason it's called the Affordable Care Act, and you turn it over to the Republicans, it'll be the Unaffordable Care Act.
Exactly,
That's-
and one of the biggest things is a private insurer cannot turn you down for a pre-existing condition. And that's been one of the true blessings of this bill. And a lot of people that would have gone bankrupt or lost their homes did not lose their homes because they were able to buy affordable health care off the exchanges.
Right.
So that's what a failure it's been.
Well, exactly, and so the voters need to start asking these questions that we're asking. I mean, it sounds great. Let's get rid of Obamacare. It's apparently a winning issue because people are voting for politicians that are saying this. But if you look at the actual facts, why would you want to get rid of Obamacare?
The Republican platform is, I'm against everything that Obama has done, and I want to invade every country on the planet.
Yeah,
That
that's
pretty
it.
much is the two-pronged approach.
And now look what they're doing with the Supreme Court nominee now. Jumping in and wanting to bypass the Constitution.
Right here, you have
Yeah.
it right here, the Constitution of the United States.
I carry
right
that with
there.
me now every day.
Well, it's in the Constitution that it doesn't say unless you're Obama and it's your last term, you
That's
don't
right.
get to make a recommendation to the Supreme Court. It does not say that in here.
Well, and the irony is with Anthony Scalia, he was saying you go to the words of the Constitution.
Absolutely.
And so there's nothing, as you point out, Marsha, that says that Obama should not make an appointment or at least offer candidates
And
for an
Justice
appointment.
Kennedy was appointed in the last year Reagan was in
Right.
office.
And
So that's just gets
And
the whole
McConnell
lie
voted for him. McConnell voted for him in that period, and he's now
Yes.
saying we can't do that.
Yeah.
Right.
I was
They
trying to
don't
think of
mention that.
right. I was trying to think of a term that might represent how we would view all of the Republican candidates as they are campaigning for president, and it puts me in mind of an elementary school playground.
Now, see, I think it is a reality TV show.
And
I think that Trump is appealing to people that like to watch The Real Housewives of Orange County. I mean, it is, you watch the Democratic debates, whether you agree with what Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton says or not, they're discussing issues. They're not saying, I hate your hair, and you're a liar, and you're an old man, and there's none of that kind of thing, you know, with Bernie and Hillary.
Yeah.
They are debating different issues and how they would respond to different national problems as the chief executive, as
Right.
the President of the United States, as the head of the armed services. You know, and then you have the Republicans come out and it's like, well, you're a liar and I'm going to make a pig face and look at you and all this crazy kind of stuff. It's just...
Well, Saturday Night Live encapsulates all of the ridiculous things that Trump is saying, you know, with the building the wall between Mexico and us and making the Mexicans pay for it. I don't know if you saw the Saturday Night Live thing where, you know, the government of Mexico offers him this gigantic check and Trump objects. He says, oh, no, that's too much. I didn't want that much. Oh, no, you take it, Mr. Trump. I mean, all these statements are ridiculous that he's making, and so So the comedians love all this stuff.
Thing.
It's entertainment.
And you know, one of the things that they have not talked in any great detail about is the problem that we have with guns today. You know, each and every one of them says they want to do nothing that would diminish in any capacity any discussion about guns. And I know Marty's very interested in this whole business of guns. He didn't bring his to town today, but Marty, you want to give us a little brief discussion about this whole idea of guns, because every one of those candidates wants nothing to do with amending in any fashion or presenting any information that would in some way prevent the horror that is happening in this country.
Well, we're talking about guns, and I'm not against guns. I have guns in my house, and I hunted for 40-some years. In fact, I just bought a new pistol for protection. But we're talking about homegrown terrorism. It says here, angry white men have committed more acts of terrorism on U.S. soil than any other group since 9/11. But they always want to blame it on the Islamic extremists. But remember Timothy McVeigh, that was before 9/11.
Yes.
How many people he killed? He was a white man. And 26 people have been killed by those professing some sort of sympathy for Islamic extremists. And then there have been 352 mass shootings in which 4 more people were killed or injured in the United States this last year. According to a study by the New American Foundation, more Americans have been killed in domestic terrorist attacks by right-wing zealots than jihadists since 9/11. So everybody has this idea that these Islamic extremists are doing all the killing, but a lot of it's done in this country here alone. And when Bill Clinton was in office, he passed that assault weapons ban. But it was only good for 10 years,
yep.
And George Bush let it expire. And he should have never done that, because a lot of these killings were done by these assault weapons. Remember back in the 30s when they had all the wars with the machine guns, all the criminals? Well, Congress banned machine guns, and nobody saw a problem with that. And you still can't buy a machine gun today. But you can buy an assault weapon.
Yeah, and you can buy, and that's the problem with this whole idea. If you are concerned about this quote on the terrorism, we've got to look at domestic terrorism as well. The guy that shot those 20 kids up in Connecticut, was it? I mean, how horrible can that be?
Newtown, yeah.
I mean, how horrible is that? And that wasn't done by the Muslims or the extremists.
No.
And like you were saying, so I think there has to be some legislation passed that is going to in some way monitor who gets a gun. These people who are saying that there should be no background checks, and you can sell them at the...
Well, yeah, the Republicans would not approve the suggestion that people on the watch list for international air flights, in other words, these are suspected terrorists, that you should not prevent them from getting guns. I mean, that was the recent proposal a few months ago. The people on the watch list should not be allowed to buy weapons, and that was defeated as I guess a slippery slope or something. But with guns, I mean, actually, the people get shot more often as your spouse or someone you're living with,
family,
with a gun. Suicides.
Well,
so many suicides are caused by
people have a gun available.
You know, if you're depressed, I mean, you use a gun to end your life, you're going to be successful.
Yeah.
If you don't have a gun, maybe you'll slit your wrist, and
but
you'll probably
a little bit
saved.
of better chance of living.
In some states, it's easier to buy a gun than cast a vote.
Yes, it's getting that way more and more, or get Sudafed for that matter.
And I think what
but the problem is it's not violating the Second Amendment of the Constitution. This is all about the NRA wanting to make money. This has nothing to do with anybody's constitutional rights being violated. Everyone can still purchase a weapon. It's just that if we had some controls on people that should not have them, like people with a history of mental illness, people on the 9/11 watch list, You need to have some controls on this, and the NRA doesn't want to have any controls on it, not because of the Second Amendment of the Constitution. It's because they want to make money.
Yeah.
Well, and they've been successful. I mean, all
yes, and they've
gun
been very
sales
successful.
have gone up under the 8 years under Obama.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a whole different.
Yeah.
There's another thing going on there.
Well,
you know,
I know
there's
that.
There's people that just do not like having an African American in the White House.
Yeah.
Period. Full stop.
Yeah.
And that had a mass exodus to the gun stores, people buying guns.
Well, never in the history of America has one political party ever coalesced around an issue like the Republicans have with President Obama. We've had difficulties over the years, but historically, ever since Obama's been president, the Republicans have en masse voted against every single thing he tried to present. Not because it wasn't good for America, but because he presented it.
Yeah.
And that's a terrible commentary on Americans' government.
Well,
never in history has it done where the party has coalesced around that anti-Obama.
Well, exactly. Once Obama's no longer president, I think the Republicans are going to lose a lot of their rhetoric because everything is, like you say, being blamed on Obama.
Well, they'll be happy to hate Hillary, or they'll be happy to hate Bernie. I mean, but they found that that's something that's working for them, is being obstructionist. Mm-hmm. That their particular group that votes for them likes the obstructionism. I mean, I have never heard before, now maybe it has happened in history, but in my life I don't ever remember a party coming out and saying, now some of them have softened their rhetoric on this, but initially when Scalia died, I have never heard a party come out and say, we are absolutely not going to consider anybody he puts up for this.
Thank goodness
We're not going to do it. And I mean, there have been people that have in back rooms said, we're not going to do this. But they come right out on TV. The body wasn't even cold.
And McConnell come out and says...
McConnell's coming out saying, we're not going to accept anything.
Well, this isn't surprising. Polls show right now that about 40% of the Republicans are convinced that Obama's a Muslim.
Yeah. Can
Now,
you believe
I
that?
don't know, you know, after 7 years of observing the president, how you could conclude that he's a Muslim is just baffling to me.
Well, because you want to believe it. If you want to believe something, even when a fact is staring you in the face, well, you know, you've talked to Joe Silverman. You know, I mean, you do not want to accept that as a fact, because the other thing, which is a lie, comes into your paradigm of how you want to see the world.
The one thing about the Republicans, they always have an ulterior motive, and the reason they don't want to bring up a candidate because they're hoping they get a Republican in, then they can get another right-winger in. They do not want that court to go the other way.
Well, it's an example of reckless Republican rhetoric, because every time you excuse me, every time you turn on the TV, they're threatening that Muslim fanatics are going to be out killing us all the time. Therefore, we all got to carry guns. Fear is the worst condition under which you make a decision. If people are fearful of something, they sometimes make the most irrational calls.
Yes.
And that's what the Republican Party's doing. They're trying to scare people. Obama's going to take your guns. He's never said that.
No.
And all these immigrants are going to come in and they're going to kill people. They're going to take your jobs. And that's not true. There are people going back to Mexico in greater numbers than people coming in.
There's two things that the Republicans are well known for, and they do a good job at it: fear and smear.
Yeah. Well, Ted Cruz, the pro-life candidate.
Yes.
Well, he wants to carpet bomb Syria, and he'll find out whether
kill all those
the sand is going to glow. I mean, talk about contradictory thought process.
Well, they're all pro-life till someone's born. And then once someone's born, they want to take care of it.
These pro-lifers are not. They're pro-birthers, and the moment the child is born, the heck with them.
You're on your own.
And that's the whole thing about it. We'll get down to 1 minute.
Those people are against abortion, they're for war, which doesn't make sense.
And that's another thing. When did we ever become the savior of the whole world? We can't convert the world to democracy when they've had thousands of years of autocratic rule. And you can't... I had a Republican woman tell me we ought to go over and convert them all to Christianity. I mean, you talk about idiotic statements. Well, we're down to the last 30 seconds, and unfortunately, we've had a pretty interesting discussion today, but we're going to be back again next month. We're going to get into more politics and more ways that we think the country could be made better, because the Democratic Party is committed to that. The health, safety, and welfare of the American people is in great danger, is the way things stand now. If we take that playground crowd on the other side, I don't know whom I would even want to envision under my greatest fear being in the White House. So anyway, I thank very much the panel, Marsha, Marty, and George, and we'll be back next month, and we'll try to come up with some ideas about how we can make America better, but it's certainly not by listening to the members of the other side. So thank you very much, and folks, thank you for watching, and remember, get your legislators by letting them know, get back to the table, we need a budget. Thank you very much.